All right, here we go. Welcome to Pondering Parenthood podcast, or as we are affectionately calling it, Triple P.
Triple P.
Triple P. This is our first episode. I am your host, Mike Oquendo, and I'm here with...
Meghann Oquendo, the wife, because we're married.
Yeah, co-host.
Co-host, that's right.
Yeah. So we're creating this podcast together, Pondering Parenthood. And a few different reasons why we decided to do this. The first reason is that no one else in the world has come up with the podcast.
It's a novel concept right now.
No one's doing it.
We are the only ones.
That's reason one.
Very unique.
Yeah, we wanted to be the first ones out there doing it.
That's right.
We're hilarious also. That's really funny.
Who wouldn't want to listen to us talk?
Absolutely.
You know?
I recently switched out of a job. I was teaching for 11 years. And, that's the sort of job where you find some purpose, right? A lot of people who go into that kind of job are looking to make a difference, and did it for 11 years and switched into a job that provided me with a little bit more flexibility in my life. And I'm now needing something that gives me a little more purpose.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of my passion project. I've been thinking about doing this for a while. And so that's why I'm doing this. Why are you doing this?
I think I'm doing this because it's just a fun idea, and we'll get to hang out together, which is kind of...
Oh, you want?
Obviously,
you want to hang out with me?
Yeah, I want to hang out with you.
That's very sweet.
But it's it'll be dedicated time to sit and talk,
right,
about our lives and
not like talking about what's for dinner or grocery lists or
quality conversations,
right?
More in depth,
some
stuff.
depth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that'll be fun. But likewise, I taught kindergarten for 9 years and recently took a new job this year. So I'm outside of the classroom, still in education, but I'm missing a little bit of that spark from being around little kids all day and having a lot of early education conversations. So this seems like a good little area where we can talk about our kids and they're at young ages. So I don't know. That's exciting to me.
Yeah, so what is this exactly? I mean, we keep saying this thing. So our goal in this podcast is basically just to talk all things parenting. And, right now, my favorite type of podcast is the long form interview podcast where people talk about a variety of things. Usually they're about nothing, but there's depth and there's vulnerability, and it just seems very real. And so I was most interested in creating a podcast that followed that form. So we'll have the goal right now is to have 2 episodes a month, with 1 episode being that interview. We'll interview people in our lives. And, the hope is that if this thing grows, that we'll be able to interview people maybe that we don't know, which would be really cool. But that's kind of a down the road pipe dream sort of thing. Pipe dream? Pipe dream?
Pipe.
Pipe
I think
dream.
pipe dream.
Yeah, I think pipe dream. I think you're right. We'll edit that out later.
We'll forget.
So, yeah, interview people in 1 episode, and then another episode. The hope is that we'll talk to each other, and we'll talk about things we've experienced in parenting, but also talk about what it's like to have a relationship while you are becoming parents and dealing, with the in and outs and daily life of parenting. Because I think that's one of the things that people don't really spend a whole lot of time talking about right now. There's tons of podcasts where people are talking about parenting, but your relationship with your partner changes and develops and morphs and
goes through evolution of sorts. I think that's very accurate that that's not being talked about as much. So this will be a good place to talk about it.
Yeah. And the one thing that we think is really important to point out is that this is not going to be a podcast with experts. So we don't know what we're talking about. We're not experts.
Actually listen to us.
Yeah, don't listen to this podcast. That's the number one thing you should do, is you should just turn this off. If you've listened this far, congratulations, but just stop now.
Yeah.
Don't listen anymore. Because you're not going to learn anything. There's going to be no learning in this.
Negative learning.
You're going to come out dumber.
Yep.
After listening to these episodes. But the goal is basically just pure and complete catharsis. It's just talking to, listening to, connecting with people who are going through something similar to what you might be going through. Our main goal is that you have some kind of emotional reaction to these things, whether it's laughter or crying or, whatever. Maybe you're screaming at that's what I would be doing, I suppose. I'd be screaming at the radio while driving. But the goal is connection. That's the goal in this podcast.
Yeah, we want open, real, honest, vulnerable conversations. Especially with parents at different stages of parenting, people who came into parenting in different ways. So we're hoping to get a good diversity of people to talk to in our own inner circle. But yeah, I think that is what sets us apart a little bit, is that this is just people we know. Very real, relationship based.
We're not trying to teach in this podcast. We're just trying to understand.
Yeah. Build connections.
Build connection. So as we've already mentioned, we've got 2 kids who we'll refer to as Snuzz and Mouse for their protection.
Yep.
Snuzz and Mouse.
We understand that at some point, if this is out there, that they can listen to it when they're older. So.
Yeah, we've already talked about. Well, specifically, we've talked about how I need to censor the things that I say because we don't want to provide them with any fodder for their therapy sessions when they're in their 20s. So
they'll be fine.
Everything's fine.
So Snuzz is 4 years old.
Snuzz is 4. Yeah.
Mouse is 18 months currently. I think it'll be really cool to have this as a little time capsule of like where they're at in development as we go on, listening back.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it'll be fun to, because that's like you kind of forget like what they were like.
Yeah.
You have general ideas of like they were like this at that age, but here we'll be able to like actually record. We'll have recordings of what they were doing and what they were like at these ages.
Yeah.
These are pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty special.
So what what were your thoughts about parenting? Did you think about it when you were younger? Did you always want to be a parent? You met me and you were like, all of a sudden you felt a quivering in your uterus and you were like, must have children? Or
Stop. That's
no,
disgusting.
It's not like that?
No.
Oh, you found me disgusting and decided, no, maybe I don't want to procreate with this guy.
No, I definitely always knew I wanted to be a parent from the time I was young. I think part of that was probably because my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so like I remember thinking that I would be a stay-at-home mom. I think I always envisioned like 4 kids when we met, you and I. Well, when we met, I told you that I probably wanted around 4, and you wanted around.
I said 2.
2.
It wasn't around. I said I want 2.
And I should say I'm one of 4. That's why 4 was the number, I think. And so when you said 2, I said, well, then we'll have 3.
You said, great, we can compromise at 3.
Yeah.
And then I said, no, I'm not having more than 2. And then it was an ongoing thing for a few years that you were like, oh, yeah, no, we've agreed to 3.
Yeah.
But I had never agreed to 3. I had agreed to 2.
Yeah. In my mind, we were going to have 3.
Right.
And
this is the thing that you do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. And then we had Snuzz, and we both were okay, going down.
Well, again, yeah, just the way you're talking about it is not right, because what I said was I'm done after her snuzz.
To be clear,
we should talk about why that's the
case.
Not
because of Snuzz. We obviously adore Snuzz.
Oh yeah, we love her very, very much.
But the babyhood phase was...
For those who are mandated reporters who are getting ready to call CPS, no, we love our children very much. They're wonderful.
They're absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, Snuzz was a pretty tough kiddo to start.
Tough baby. Babyhood was really hard.
She was 5 weeks early.
Yep, she just wasn't ready to be here.
She wasn't, as is typical of her personality, she wasn't ready to be here, but she was like ready to be here.
But she came out fierce.
Yeah.
And ready. Yeah.
She's
she came early.
She knows what she wants without having any idea what she wants.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty
quintessential
Snuzz.
The postpartum period was definitely difficult. And I remember thinking, okay, as long as we have a sibling, I'll be happy. And you went through a period where you're like, nope, we're done. We're gonna have.
Yeah, no, I was broken.
Yeah, it was actually a very, very difficult time.
I had a very traumatic childhood. I had a lot of tough stuff growing up and into my teen years. But I gotta say, like, that first year of Snuzz's life was probably one of the hardest years of my life.
Wow.
It was really tough. And we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty open about my feelings and how that all went. But it was tough. Yeah, it was definitely tough. But you knew from a very young age that you wanted to have kids.
Yes.
You knew you wanted 4.
Yes.
But you're very happy with 2.
Yes. Now I'm extremely happy with 2. I'm very comfortable with that. What about you? Did you always think you'd have kids?
Yeah, you and I remember this a little bit differently, but I'm sure you're right. I spent most of my life, I think I spent most of my life kind of being on the fence with kids. Although you say that when we first met, I was pretty adamant that I wanted.
Yeah, I remember a specific date because I was ready to like start settling down. Like when I met you, I was like, oh, this could be really serious. So pretty early on, I asked about kids because I knew I wanted them. Mm-hmm. And you definitely said, oh, yeah, I'm definitely going to have kids.
And that's probably true. I mean, I have a pretty terrible memory. But I do know that I'd spent a good portion of my life going back and forth on it. As I mentioned just a little bit ago, I had a pretty rough childhood. And so there was a huge part of me that, had kind of a conflicted relationship with the idea of having kids. And then there's a lot of I've got anxiety, depression, there's addiction in my family, and so there's this whole fear of passing things on, and then there are self-esteem stuff am I good enough to pass things on, and again we'll get into that in this podcast 'cause I think that's all very normal stuff that people are dealing with. But I definitely think that I was in a place where if I had met somebody who didn't want kids and we fell in love and we decided to get married and I was with somebody who was like, I don't want to have kids, I think that I would have been like, okay, cool, we won't have kids. Whereas if I had met somebody, which I obviously did, who I fell in love with and wanted to be with, and they wanted kids, then I would have been like, yeah, okay, great, we'll have kids. So I think you come from a place of definitely needed that for yourself. I think I come from a place of I don't know that I needed it. Having said that, I think I have become the best version of myself with having kids. I think that there's not really a whole lot else in life that causes you or not that I mean this in a negative way, but that forces you to really put up the mirror to yourself, take a look, and determine and decide, who are you going to be? Because, man, they come out and they pick up on every little thing you do, and they reflect back the sorts of things about yourself that you might love, but also the things about yourself that you might
Yeah.
not.
You start hearing yourself in them all the time.
Yeah. And you're like, wait, why are you saying this awful, terrible thing? And you're like, oh, wait, it's because that's something that I say or do.
Yeah. No, that's for sure true.
Yeah. Okay, so establishing that, you definitely, from a really early age, wanted kids. And, I could have gone either way, but obviously very happy that we have kids. You must have had a vision of how it would go or what it would be like to be a parent. And I assume that this vision that you created when you were very young has gone exactly the way you had in your mind, right? It's everything's been exactly the way you thought it would be, correct?
No.
Oh, okay, that's surprising. Tell us more.
Yeah, so I had already mentioned, like, as a kid thinking, I would want to be a stay-at-home parent, or even if I wasn't able to do that, as a teacher, like, maybe I'd step out of the classroom for a few years in the early stages and be a stay-at-home mom for a little bit and then go back to work. That was kind of what I envisioned. I, like we mentioned already, the postpartum period was really, really difficult.
With Snuz specifically.
With Snuz. And just a little info about that, like, she would cry for hours and not be able to settle or calm.
Yeah, so for those listening, any of the words that are associated with
colic, purple crying,
witching hours,
the witching hours.
Yeah, like she would just,
like, from like 5 to 8, she would just scream
nonstop.
Yeah,
she wouldn't nap by herself. She was attached to us. I mean, we bought a yoga ball that you had while you were pregnant.
Yep.
That got way more use afterwards because we would sit in our closet.
You did this part.
We'd sit in the closet with her. And we'd bounce on the ball and sing until she'd fall asleep. And then we would just wear her. Like, we did our maternity and paternity leave separately.
Yes.
And so, like, she would nap 2 or 3 times a day. So for, like, 5 hours, I just would have this kid strapped to me.
Yes, which is so funny, too, because looking back, I think part of the issue there was a period where she would just sleep for hours on us in the carrier, and we wouldn't change it because it was like, oh, she's finally, like, calm and quiet and sleeping.
Yeah.
But then I think that she got so much daytime sleep in that period that then it would affect her in the evening where she wasn't falling asleep or where she was almost undertired or something. But it's so hard to know.
I remember those first 5 weeks were actually pretty good.
Yeah.
If you remember,
the first 5 weeks she was a potato.
If you remember,
slept.
I actually went on and did a podcast with some friends. We're talking about what it was like to be a new dad.
Yes.
And I was talking about how things were going really well.
That's right.
And I'm pretty sure it was either that night or the next night. It was like there wasn't like a slowly things got worse. It was like, oh yeah, things are really great. And then immediately after that podcast, it was like somehow somebody heard that and was like, oh, you think things are good? Like, let's change that.
Yes. Yeah. That first month or so was so easy.
It was great.
She
was a potato.
She just slept. She was a
She
potato.
ate, she slept, she pooped.
And then once she hit that 5 weeks time, she just flipped.
It's like when she hit the date that she was supposed to have actually been born.
Yeah. Yeah,
she was 5 weeks early.
5 weeks early. That's
she's a New Year's baby.
Yeah.
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 But she was supposed to be born right at the beginning of February, like February 3rd or 4th. Yeah.
Was her due date.
And it was like right around then that she started to, things started to get rough. And then we had like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, I always say about 4 months. You've said it was more like 8 or 9 months.
Yeah, that first year was really hard.
For you, like personally, for what you were going through, which we'll talk about. But yeah, so I just think that I didn't expect any of that. I knew I would be tired and exhausted and have a newborn awake every few hours at night. I was like prepared mentally for that. But the not being able to like calm her as her mother and like knowing that was my sole role and responsibility was to like help this little being, and I couldn't calm her down. That was extremely hard. So that was, I was not expecting any of that.
Yeah. And you learned pretty quickly that you definitely didn't want to be a stay-at-home parent.
Yeah, so when I had to return from work, I got about 4 months maternity leave because of my breaks.
Because you're a teacher.
Extending it a little bit, yeah. So around the 4-month mark was when I had to go back, and I remember it being really difficult having to say goodbye to her every morning and all of that. But I also remember being really excited to get in the car and like listen to my music and drink my coffee and get to work and talk to adults and have conversations with people that, you know, could talk back and
yeah.
and have like a reason to shower and get dressed. So there were all those things that were just like, once I stepped inside the school that first day, I was like, like it was almost like a break, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Like to get back into it.
Yeah, and we both had an opportunity to be the stay-at-home parent, right? Because our maternity and paternity leave were separate. And I think we both agree that stay-at-home parents are, I mean, that's the hardest job out there. Like, it's just...
Yeah, I think that was super valuable for both of us to experience that.
For sure.
Because when you're alone with a newborn for hours on end, and there's nothing to really... I remember nothing felt like there was a way to mark your day as it went on. Like, the only marker in the day was you coming home. And it's like, oh, now it's evening. Like, it just... Yeah. Time just felt so strange.
I kind of feel that way now in my job, actually.
Because you're home,
I don't have a newborn. But yeah, it's like, yeah. But when you're home with a newborn and you're just doing... It's like you basically are doing the same thing day in and day out, although every day is kind of different because they're not really in any kind of routine. But it's just a grind. You're just grinding and grinding and grinding, and then it all ends. The kid goes to sleep, and then you like decompress for a bit, and then you go to sleep, and then you wake up and just do it all over
right
again.
And in those early days you're not even really decompressing because you're so exhausted, so it's like, well, now I'm just gonna go to bed early because I know I'm gonna be awake with a newborn in a few hours. But
time is really weird in those first few months.
Yeah.
It's really the way the brain doesn't remember, like you remember like the feeling of it, but it's like hard to remember it in detail.
Because you're so sleep deprived, like you're literally probably not encoding things in your brain properly.
So it has not gone the way you thought it would go.
Bits and
parts of it, yeah.
But I'll going back to that valuable time where we were each kind of the stay-at-home parent. I feel like we really valued each other in those moments. Like, I would be at home all day with her, and at that point you hadn't really experienced that, so you'd kind of get home and maybe this invisible work, so you're just doing stuff all day long, and you don't have anything to show for it.
Well, the person's been at work
the
person's been at work all day. It's like, I've been working all day. Yes. I'm exhausted. And it's like the person who is at home with the kid
is more exhausted.
Has also been working all day. It's just very different.
Working all day, and it doesn't look like it. So then when you had to go through that, I think there was a level of understanding that you 100%. Hadn't had prior. And not that you ever like made,
No, but you don't, there is a sense when you're working and the other person is at home with the kid and they're like, I need a break.
Right.
If you're not at home with the kid and you're at a job, in your mind, you're like, what do you mean you need a break? Like, you've just been home all day.
Yeah.
But once you've done it, you like that totally goes out the window. It's like absolutely not. That is, if anyone needs a break, it's the one who's been at home with the kid all day. Like,
so I think that really helped
stuff.
Just even our relationship, like having that level of empathy and understanding and what that day-to-day grind feels and looks like.
Yeah.
In that time period.
Do you feel like with Mouse, I mean, obviously we had an experience that was pretty intense with Snuzz. Mm-hmm. Do you think Mouse was more of like what you thought it would be like to have a newborn?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do.
She's a pretty easy newborn.
She was very easy.
She's become a slightly more difficult toddler.
Yeah.
But she was a pretty easy newborn.
Yes, she was like the easiest.
She just slept.
I remember having a friend over for coffee one morning, and she was in tummy time while we're hanging out and talking, and like, I don't know, 20 minutes in, we just look over and she's passed out on the floor. Like, did not whimper, did not whine. She just like, I mean, she was right in front of us. Yeah. But she just like fell asleep.
Yeah, she's always been...
Snuzz never did that. Like,
no.
I can't imagine...
Snuzz still struggles with sleep. Snuzz is still, even at 4...
getting to sleep.
Yeah.
She's fine overnight and everything.
Mouse has always been a pretty good sleeper.
Yeah. So, I would definitely say that the experience with Mouse was way more what I envisioned.
Yeah. Has there been anything now, though, like, now, obviously, Snuzz is, Snuzz has her moments like all kids do, but like, I would say Snuzz is like a pretty typical kid, like, for the most part, fairly easygoing, obviously has her moments, and Mouse is now in toddler stage, and she's becoming a little bit more of a handful, for sure. Yeah. But now that they're a little bit older and you're able to, like, actually do things with them, is there anything that is more like, oh yeah, I kind of thought this would be what it would be like parenting? Yeah,
I think I've always just really loved kids, and especially young children. My degree was early education, so just that, especially now where they're interactive and they're coloring and they want to paint, or, well, yeah, they both paint now, but they're actually doing things, building with blocks. That kind of thing, I can be super present, and I always thought I would really enjoy that aspect of parenting. So I think that's all fit into my expectations. I still really enjoy like that quality time. I look forward to the weekends to just spend time with them and like reading books and just one-on-one time. I think again, just the baby stage was not... I thought I would enjoy it more than I did. And that's probably the case with a lot of people.
The baby stage
I would imagine.
For me, the baby stage was my least favorite stage so far. I've enjoyed it more and more as they've gotten older and older.
Around 6 months, I think, was when they can, like, sit up and start trying to, like, communicate with you a little bit, even if it's just, like, cooing or, like, little...
You're getting something back.
Yeah, or smiles even. Yeah. That was one thing with Snuzz. She didn't smile at me. She was smiling at everyone else.
That's right.
Before she'd smile at me. And that was really hard.
Really hard, yeah.
And, and I looked it up.
Remember she was smiling at my aunts? And we had never seen, she had never smiled, and she's just smiling at these...
They came to visit. And
these strangers to her.
All of a sudden, she's smiling. And it's like, but you're screaming with us? Yeah. Your parents?
Shout out to Aunt Michelle and Aunt Randy.
So frustrating. I had looked it up at that time because I was worried, like, why is she smiling at everyone else? And what I found was some babies, like, because they identify so strongly with the mother... And they basically just see themselves as the same as their mother. Yeah. It's like they see the mom's face and they're like, oh, well, that's always there. Right. So I don't view it as different. Or it's like a novel face, they're going to be more smiley. So what about you? Do you feel like parenting has turned out how you expected?
I don't know what I expected. I don't know. I think... I have this thing where I'm a planner. Like that's kind of the role that I play in I'm neurotic. I'm type A. I'm a planner. But I think when things are not real until they're real.
Yeah.
And so I very much, like, I'll be like, oh yeah, we'll just do this thing and da-da-da. And then, like, but I don't really, like, know that I know what it's going to be like.
Well, can I just share a story right here?
Yeah, of course.
Because I don't know if you remember this, but it was probably, like, 2 nights after we got home from the hospital. And I think you were holding Snuzz. And you looked at me and you were like, wait, this isn't something that we just, like, did and now it's over. Like, this is just gonna continue on. Like, it's not like, you get engaged, well, then you get married and you buy the house and then you have the house. And, well, now we had a baby, but, like, it's just gonna get older and we're always gonna... And it was like this epiphany.
I can remember that as if it was yesterday. Because I remember there being this moment of, like, oh, there's no going back. Like, this is it. We're here now, no matter what. Like, this is it. Well, because, like, with most other choices that you make, like, if it doesn't work out, then, like, there's, like, oh, we bought this house. It's not really working out. We, sell the house. Like, oh, we had this kid. Oh, it's not really working out. It doesn't matter. You got the kid. Like, there was definitely a moment of, like, oh, we've changed our life.
Yes.
And we'll talk about grieving the old life, when you have that life. And, but yeah, I don't know what I expected. I think I had this vision of it being, vision of it being easier than it was. And I think that vision was based on absolutely nothing. And it was just completely wrong. Like, it's just, I think, obviously you experienced your postpartum thing with Snuzz. And I'm not to take away from anything you experienced, because we both can have our experiences. One doesn't take away from the other. But I think I had an extraordinarily difficult adjustment to being a parent. And I think I still, even 4 years in, I struggle with the fact that I, like, can't really do whatever I want whenever I want. I struggle with the fact that, like, when you become a parent, you make sacrifices. Like, there are major sacrifices. And I have gotten better with accepting that, but it's still really hard. And so I think I didn't really internalize in a very authentic way, or a very realistic way, I should say, how much was going to change with having kids. And I definitely felt like after we had Snuzz, especially with how difficult it was, initially with her in those first few months, I definitely felt to some extent like we had ruined our lives. Mm-hmm. And I think I said that. I think I said out loud that we've ruined our life. We had such a great life. Everything was so great. And I should just say, like, I adore both of our children. I think I have very special relationships with both of them.
Absolutely.
But I think with Snuzz, the relationship is really special.
Yeah.
Because she and I are so similar.
Yep.
And, it's interesting, right? Like, you love your kid. For people out there listening who have multiple children, like, you don't love one more than the other, but you love them differently. Like, they're differently, and they're different. And your first, there's something about your first.
Yes.
That's, I think,
1000%.
I mean, I wasn't daddy until she at some point started calling me that, you know?
And every stage with the first is new to both of you.
Right.
Have you thought of that before? Like, everything you do with the first is brand new.
Right. Yeah. What's kind of cool, though, well, just to sort of finish that thought, as hard as it was, and as much as she did break me, and like 100%, I do adore them, and I'm really happy that we do have them. I'm probably gonna, on this podcast, I think I'm probably gonna talk a lot about the difficulties of parenting, just because that's how my brain works. Yep. But I hope that our listeners will understand that there is very much an undercurrent under all that of, like, extraordinary love
For sure.
For our children.
And I think that's a big part of why we wanted to do this podcast, was because there's not a lot of space to talk about the negatives. I think it's getting better. I think people are opening up more, and with social media, you're seeing a lot more into people's lives and day to day, and people are feeling more comfortable sharing the hardships. But, like, it's okay to not be okay in those, early stages, for sure. And to have an outlet to talk about that is so important.
Yeah. To go back to something you had mentioned about, like with your first, each stage is brand new. What has been so fascinating for the second is that even though we're going through the stages again, they are so different.
Yeah,
that's true. Snuz has always really been into reading. She's always been into books. I mean, you're teaching her to read now, and she's so into it. Her like language acquisition from such a young age was so wild. Mm-hmm. But I mean, still, she's 4.
She's so verbal.
She's 4, and I don't think she is that successful at running. Like, she, as far as like the gross motor goes, it's just not there for her.
Right.
Like, whereas with Mouse, I don't think she knows that I'm Dad or your mom. I think we're just here. We're just like, these people are like, but like, we have this indoor structure that she's climbing up and down.
Yep.
She's on top. She, like, her gross motor is just
climbing.
Yeah, she can outrun Snuz. Like, so like, it is interesting how it is true. Like, with the first, everything was so new. And with the second, it's not new. It's like, yep, we've done it. But it is so different. Yeah. And it's crazy how it's same genetics, like, same household, but, man, they are, besides the fact that they look alike, they are completely different children. Yeah. And that's kind of cool.
It is really cool. It's very fun. It's very fun.
So we're kind of winding down to the end of the first episode. So this was mostly just an opportunity to kind of set the stage for what's to come. Just thought maybe we could close out with some fears. Do you have any fears in embarking on this podcast journey?
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm a little worried about is parenting conversations can end in very volatile, like, reactions, like, with very volatile...
Well, super personal.
Yeah. And so I follow a few people on social media where their whole shtick is their parenting, and just reading comments of how harsh people are. And it's frustrating because if you are a parent, like, how hard it is. So then to be so critical of other parents who might just do something differently. So I think just a little worried that if we touch on more of the controversial topics, that's gonna rub certain people the wrong way. But that's just the nature of it. And I think just wanting to have an audience that's really respectful and understanding, and we're all learning together.
Yeah.
Do you have any hesitations?
I mean, I do think I tend to be an oversharer, so I'm a little bit concerned. You brought up the other night before we started doing this, you brought up the idea that, like, at some point they're going to be able to listen to this. Yeah. Like, our kids, I'm talking about. Yeah. And so, like, I do have some fears that, I mean, thankfully we can edit, right? So, hopefully we can edit that stuff out. But, I mean, that the goal is not to edit. The goal is to have these conversations be open and vulnerable and honest. But I also genuinely and seriously, I don't want to put anything out there that could cause my kids pain at some point. So I'm a little bit nervous about that. And kind of in line with what you said and in line with this, I don't think my experience is unique. I did have postpartum depression. It was really hard after Snuz was born. I have not come into parenting in an easy way. I've been kind of dragged kicking and screaming to some extent. And so I am a little bit nervous that there'll be some judgment there about my experience. And my hope is that I'll be proven wrong, and that actually there are people who will end up listening to this and kind of be like, I've had the same experience or something similar. And I'm hoping that me providing a voice to this experience maybe can help other people find their voice with the experience. But I'm a little bit nervous that there will be some judgment. Then again, the only people that are ever going to listen to this are going to be like our family. So
my mom.
Yeah. She's definitely going to listen to this. Hi, Mom.
I love you. Shout out.
But like, if this does get bigger and if people do listen to this, I would be a little bit concerned about some judgments.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable.
So to close this out, for those of you who are not our family members or friends, who are just random strangers listening to this, if you are interested in getting in contact with us, we do have an email address. The email address is ponderingparenthoodpodcast@gmail.com. That's ponderingparenthoodpodcast@gmail.com. Email us, chat with us. Our hope is that we do extend beyond our family and friends, and that maybe we can start talking to some people out there about parenting.
Are we sharing out what we think our next few episodes will be?
Nope. It's gonna be a surprise.
Surprise. I'm ready.
For everyone, because I don't I don't know what we're doing. I don't know. What do you think? I planned beyond this?
We'll figure it out.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.